The marble-walled hearing room carried that peculiar Washington hush, the kind that isn't quiet so much as coiled. Phones were set to vibrate, pens hovered, and every camera lens pointed toward the nameplates like crosshairs. The joint oversight session had a bland title, Federal Accountability in Disaster Spending, but nobody in the gallery believed they were here for line items. They were here for a collision. Representative Jasmine Crockett sat halfway down the dais, blazer the color of midnight, binder tabbed in tight rows like an architect's blueprint. Her posture was a promise, prepared, unbothered, unafraid. Across the witness table, Senator John Neely Kennedy adjusted his glasses and smiled the practiced smile of a man who could salt a jab with molasses. His staff had stacked a single-pager in front of him, folksy phrases, hard edges. The chair droned through introductions, the way thunder rolls before lightning. When microphones snapped alive, Kennedy drew first blood. "Ma'am," he said, voice warm as grits and twice as thick, "I've read your speeches, and I appreciate your enthusiasm. But I'm gonna say what folks outside this bubble already think. If your ideas are what pass for leadership these days, then you're not fit to lead my people through a rainstorm, much less a crisis." A few heads rose like prairie dogs. No one breathed. Crockett didn't blink. She simply closed her binder, soft, deliberate, and set her palms flat. "Senator," she said, tone level as a carpenter's spirit, "where I come from, leadership isn't a weather report. It's whether the shelter doors open, the power comes back on, and the ledger matches the promises. Since we're measuring fitness, I brought receipts." She turned a single tab. The paper whispered. In that tiny sound, the room felt the temperature change. Crockett's gaze stayed steady, but the air around her sharpened, the way a corridor narrows before a door you have to walk through. Kennedy leaned in, smile lingering like bait. "Then by all means, ma'am, educate me." "Oh, I intend to," she said, not raising her voice a millimeter. "And we'll start with the communities that are still waiting on the checks you said were already in the mail." Somewhere behind the press row, a camera motor whirred. It sounded like a fuse. Kennedy's smile didn't falter, but his hand twitched toward his notes, an instinct, not a decision. Crockett's voice was even, each syllable clipped with precision. "Your office signed off on $18 million in relief funds for the Gulf Coast," she began. "That was 14 months ago. Out of that, $12 million is still in limbo. Do you know how I know? Because I spent my recess in those towns, walking their streets, and seeing the blue tarp still on their roofs. Meanwhile, the local utility filed bankruptcy, leaving those people with no recourse but to light candles and hope they don't burn their houses down." A murmur rippled behind the press bench. Crockett didn't glance up. Her eyes stayed on Kennedy, pinning him like a collector's insect. "Ma'am," Kennedy drawled, "these processes take time." "No," Crockett cut in, "delays take time. Leadership takes action. There's a difference. And if we're going to talk about being fit to lead, let's talk about showing up when the cameras aren't rolling, when the donations have dried up, and when the headlines have moved on." Kennedy's knuckles widened around his pen. "You think I don't care about my state? I think caring without acting is sentimentalism, not leadership," she replied. "And in your state, Senator, sentiment doesn't patch roofs, reopen schools, or keep grocery shelves stocked." The chair tapped the gavel once, not a warning, just a reminder that the clock was running. Crockett leaned forward. "You wanted to measure my fitness to lead. Fine. But let's also measure yours, against the people you swore to protect, the promises you made, and the results you've delivered." Kennedy's smile finally cracked, not gone, but altered, like a mask that no longer fit quite right. The gallery had grown still enough to hear the faint rustle of Kennedy flipping a page, stalling for time under the guise of consulting his notes. Crockett's gaze didn't leave him, her stillness a deliberate counterpoint to his shifting weight in the chair. "Let's be honest," she said, "if leadership were judged by how often you attend ribbon cuttings, you'd have a gold medal. But when it comes to actually delivering for the people, your people, there's a gap wide enough to drive a convoy through." Kennedy cleared his throat. "That's not fair." "Fair? Crockett leaned in, elbows on the dais. Fair is when a family in Plaquemines Parish doesn't have to wait 14 months for a check that was promised in 2 weeks. Fair is when we don't see $3 million redirected to corporate contractors with connections to campaign donors while small businesses fold. A few reporters' pens scratched faster. Kennedy's jaw tightened. Senator, you asked if I'm fit to lead, she continued. Leadership isn't about whether you like my tone or approve of my style. It's about whether I get results for the people who sent me here. And from where I'm sitting, results don't care about folksy sayings, they care about roofs, roads, and running water. Kennedy opened his mouth, but Crockett pressed forward. So here's the question we should both answer. When history looks back on our terms in office, will they see leaders who fixed problems, or politicians who hid behind sound bites? The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was charged, like the air before a summer storm. Kennedy looked down at his notes, but for the first time, it wasn't clear if he was searching for a fact or just a way out. Kennedy's drawl was softer now, less like a performance and more like someone trying to find his footing on shifting ground. Congresswoman, you don't understand all the constraints. I understand deadlines, Crockett interrupted, her voice carrying through the chamber like a gavel strike. And I understand that when you set one, people expect you to meet it. Not hide behind excuses or bureaucratic fog. She pulled another tab from her binder, flipping it open to a chart. The numbers weren't just statistics, they were indictments. Here's your track record on relief distribution. 90 days late on average. Entire counties with zero disbursement. And in 3 separate audits, unaccounted expenditures totaling more than the annual budget for emergency housing. Kennedy's pen tapped against the desk, a slow, nervous metronome. Senator, Crockett said, lowering her tone but sharpening her edge, you don't get to question my fitness to lead while your own house is on fire. Leadership is owning the failures and fixing them, not pretending the smoke is just a little morning fog. The chair shifted in his seat, glancing at the clock. The tension in the room was almost physical now, reporters leaned forward, fingers poised, waiting for the next blow. Crockett let the pause breathe just long enough to make Kennedy look up. You wanted this exchange, Senator. You started it. Now I'm going to finish it, with facts you can't spin and results you can't deny. The gavel didn't fall, but the silence had the same finality. Kennedy shifted back in his chair, trying to reclaim the authority he'd walked in with. Congresswoman, you're cherry-picking numbers. Crockett didn't give him the chance to finish. No, Senator. I'm connecting dots you've been hoping the public wouldn't see. She slid another document into view, this one stamped in bold red, Oversight Review, Non-Compliance Findings. These aren't my numbers, she continued. They come from the Inspector General's office. Page after page of flagged contracts, delays, and mismanagement tied directly to your Oversight Committee. You signed off on every one of them. Kennedy's eyes flicked to the report. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. Let me remind you, Senator, Crockett said, her tone tightening like a bowstring, you came here to tell me I'm not fit to lead. But I don't hide from audits. I don't dodge accountability. And I certainly don't deflect with folksy one-liners when people's lives are at stake. The reporter's cameras clicked in rapid bursts, trying to capture the moment his expression shifted, no longer the confident smirk, but something sharper, edged with discomfort. Crockett tapped the report with her index finger. Leadership is about facing the truth, even when it burns. You can try to spin this all you want, but the facts are right here. And facts don't take sides, they just sit in the record, waiting for history to judge. The senator leaned forward slightly, but for once, he didn't speak. And in that silence, Crockett's words carried the weight of a gavel strike. Crockett leaned back slightly, not in retreat but in command. The kind of pause that made the other person fill the silence. Kennedy didn't. Senator, she said, voice low but cutting, you talk a lot about accountability. Let's test it. When's the last time you sat down with those families still living in FEMA trailers? Not on a tour with cameras. I mean quietly, off the record, no press release. Kennedy opened his mouth, then closed it. The pause spoke louder than any answer. That's what I thought, Crockett continued. Because if you had, you'd know they don't care about political theater. They care about clean water, working electricity, and not having to boil rainwater just to make pasta for their kids. The room shifted, reporters exchanging glances, staffers pretending to take notes but clearly listening. Crockett tapped her binder again. I came in here ready to talk policy. You came in here ready to question my legitimacy. So here's the reality check: leadership is judged in the quiet hours, in the decisions no one sees, in the promises you keep when nobody's clapping. And by that measure, Senator, your record's not just unfit, it's unfinished. Kennedy's pen stilled. The smile was gone now, replaced by a look that hovered between annoyance and calculation. Crockett didn't flinch. She'd taken his swing, absorbed it, and sent it back with interest. Now, she said, sliding the report across the table toward him, let's get back to the people we're actually here to serve. The chair's gavel came down, signaling the next speaker. But in the gallery, everyone knew the exchange wasn't just a round, it was the headline. The chair recognized another member, but the room's attention still hung on Crockett and Kennedy like a magnetic field. Even as another representative began to speak, Kennedy's eyes stayed on her, measuring, perhaps recalculating his next move. Crockett, meanwhile, was writing something in the margins of her notes. Not doodling, strategizing. She had struck the blow she wanted, but she knew in politics the follow-up was what stuck in headlines. When the floor returned to her, Crockett didn't waste time. One more thing, Senator, she said, her voice carrying without strain. You said I'm not fit to lead. I'd like to read you something from your own campaign flyer, 2 years ago. She lifted a sheet of paper. A true leader never puts politics above people. Kennedy's head tilted slightly, but he didn't interrupt. That's a good line, Crockett continued. But you can't just print it, you have to live it. And when $12 million in aid is still trapped in bureaucratic purgatory, when families are rationing bottled water in the richest country on earth, that's politics above people. You don't need me to tell you that, you wrote it yourself. There was a low rumble in the gallery, the kind that happens when a room witnesses a hit land square. Kennedy's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Crockett set the flyer down in front of him like a mirror. You invited this conversation, Senator. Don't be surprised if it reflects back more than you planned. The pause afterward wasn't silence, it was the sound of a man realizing the narrative had shifted, and it wasn't in his favor. Kennedy adjusted his microphone, leaning in with the deliberate calm of a man trying to reclaim lost ground. Congresswoman, you seem more interested in political theater than the people's work, he said, his tone cool but edged. Crockett tilted her head slightly, a faint smile forming, one that didn't reach her eyes. If holding leaders accountable in public feels like theater to you, Senator, maybe that says more about the script you've been following than about my performance. She reached for another sheet from her binder, this one a timeline. Here's the sequence of events on the Gulf Coast relief package. Every delay, every approval you signed off on, every meeting where you could have pushed the process forward but didn't. It's all here, dates, signatures, and the cost in both dollars and human lives. Kennedy opened his mouth, but Crockett didn't pause. And while we're talking about the people's work, let's remember, transparency is the people's work. Accountability is the people's work. If that makes you uncomfortable, then maybe you've mistaken comfort for leadership. A quiet of agreement came from somewhere in the audience, followed by the hurried scribbling of reporters. Crockett leaned forward just enough to close the distance. You wanted to tell me I'm not fit to lead. But leadership is about standing in the light, not hiding in the shadows of bureaucracy. And Senator, right now, the light's on you. The chair glanced up, sensing the tension climbing again. Kennedy looked down at the timeline, but the cameras were already locked on the image of Crockett holding the paper like a verdict. Kennedy took a long sip from his water glass, as though stalling for the right retort. But Crockett had no intention of letting the moment cool. "You know what the people at home see, Senator," she began. "They see a man with the power to cut through red tape choosing instead to wrap himself in it." Kennedy's gaze flicked up sharply. Crockett leaned forward, her voice steady but slicing. "They see the checks that never came. They see the contractors who got paid before the families did. And they see you, sitting here, more concerned with defending your pride than defending their lives." She flipped to the last page in her binder, a side-by-side column, promised versus delivered. The gaps were glaring. "You called me unfit to lead. But leadership is measured in results, not rhetoric. And the scoreboard, Senator, is right here for everyone to see." The camera zoomed in on the page, the bold numbers practically shouting. Kennedy shifted in his seat, his pen tapping again, this time faster. "You can call this theater if you want," Crockett finished, "but if this is a performance, it's one your constituents have been watching for too long. And they're tired of waiting for a better ending." The room was silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. It wasn't just that Crockett had answered his challenge, it was that she'd turned it into an indictment. The chair signaled her final minute. Crockett didn't waste a syllable. "Senator, when you told me I'm not fit to lead, you underestimated two things, my record and my resolve. My record speaks through every bill I've fought to pass, every community I've shown up for when the cameras weren't there. And my resolve? You're looking at it right now." She closed the binder, the sound crisp in the microphone. "Leadership isn't a title, it's a test. Every day, every decision. And the truth is, this conversation wasn't about me failing that test. It was about you avoiding it." Kennedy sat silent, eyes narrowed, as if weighing whether any comeback could survive the room's temperature. Crockett leaned back, her voice final. "You invited this moment, Senator. Now you own it." The gavel fell. The hearing moved on, but the exchange had already escaped into headlines, into soundbites, into the bloodstream of the day's political theater. And in that theater, it was clear who had written the last line. "Senator Kennedy, you began this exchange questioning my fitness to lead. But leadership is not defined by who talks the loudest, it's defined by who delivers when it matters most. I came here armed with facts, accountability, and a commitment to the people we serve. You came here with slogans. The truth is, this isn't about me, it's about the families still waiting for what they were promised, the communities still rebuilding, and the trust that's been eroded when leaders choose politics over people. If you believe that standing up for them, challenging inaction, and demanding results makes me unfit to lead, then I will wear that as a badge of honor. Because my loyalty will never be to comfort, to complacency, or to convenient narratives, it will always be to the people. So let the record show, I'm here to lead. And leadership, Senator, is a test you can't pass with words alone.